Morning, YouTube. I hope everybody's feeling particularly unburdened this morning like I am. Have you ever asked yourself, do I trust the electoral process in the United States, specifically the federal election process? The question was asked on another channel a couple months back, a channel called 307 Project. Chad over there, he asked the question, do you think presidents are elected or selected? My personal feelings on the matter is that they have been selected for at least the past several decades. I do believe that the mechanism is in place for legitimate elections. However, once the money really got involved, the profiteering off of war and, the kickbacks and money laundering, all these other businesses that corrupt politicians seem to be into, allegedly, of course. Well, that influenced the direction that they went to try and rig elections in their favor. The puppet masters controlling the puppets. Excuse me. So therefore, I believe that, yes, elections can be legitimate, but more times than not, at least recently, in recent history, they are not. They have not been legitimate. And after what happened last Tuesday, a week ago, that exposed something that I don't think a lot of people are understanding. Now, I've heard certain people on the news and YouTube talking about, the difference in the popular vote between 2020 and 2024. In 2020, Biden received 81 million and some change votes. Trump received 74 and some change, which came out to about 155 million votes. Some people say that that's more votes than there are registered voters in the country. Now, I've seen another opinion that states that was, debunked and that wasn't true. But quite frankly, when the left fact checks something, I think it probably means that it is true. So we got 155 million votes total in 2020 versus Harris, 71,800,000 versus Trump's 75 million and some change, for a total of 146 million votes, right, in the country. And there's a difference there. If I'm coming up with roughly 9 million, but I've heard it as high as 13 million, right? So there's a huge disparity between the number of popular votes. And then I've also heard it said that more people turned out to vote in this election than they did in the last one. So how could there possibly be so many more votes in the last election versus this one? That right there indicates, some shenanigans, in my opinion. But there's something else that I haven't heard anybody talking about. And it got me thinking. I got to wondering how many presidents in the history of the United States, how many presidents have ever served non-consecutive terms, right? So I looked it up. Before Trump, there was one president in the entire history of U.S. presidents has ever served non-consecutive terms. And that was Grover Cleveland back in 1893 to 1897. His first term was 1885 to 1889, and then he lost his re-election bid, and then he won re-election for two non-consecutive terms, or for a second non-consecutive term, okay? That in itself is not actually, significant. That could be an anomaly. That could be just something that happens. But the bigger question is, how many one-term presidents have there been in the history of the United States? So I looked that up. And it's funny because the website that I found the information on had Donald Trump listed as a one-term president, but this was like 2 days after the election. So I thought that was kind of funny. But anyway, subtract Trump off the list, and you have 11 presidents who only served one term. Now, I'm old enough to have lived through 3 of them, even though I don't remember really the first one. That's no, maybe not. I'd have to go back and check his dates. I don't remember his dates, but anyway, certainly Carter and Bush and Bush Senior. So I don't, but anyway, in the history of the United States, there's 11 presidents who've only served one term. They ran for re-election, but they lost the bid, on their second term. So what happened to those people when they lost their bid for the election? Well, they disappeared into history. Right? They kind of their political careers ended at that point, right? Why is that? Because they mucked their job up so badly that they didn't get elected, they didn't get reelected, and there's really no point in continuing in politics after you've failed a presidential reelection bid. Quite frankly, I don't see the point of continuing in politics after you've lost your first election bid. But Joe Biden, he ran for election 4 times before he was put into office. Oddly enough, he didn't run for president after his vice president term, which is weird if you think about it, because that's kind of the way it works, right? Instead, they gave the promise of the seat to Clinton, old Kankles. Anyway, so back to my point, when a president loses an election bid, they just kind of fade away, right? You don't hear from them much anymore. They're around until they pass away, but it doesn't, they're not prominent or influential, really. Now, you take this election cycle and you think about it for a minute, and you got to go back a little bit to, past several election cycles and think about what has been going on, right? But when Trump won in 2016, he beat who was supposed to be the most popular candidate, hands down ever, the first woman, first whatever, but he beat her soundly. He actually damn it. He beat her decisively. Let's just say that. But she refused to admit that she lost. And I believe that's due to the fact that she was promised the seat. I mean, why else would she be given the nomination versus Biden, right? But what happened was Trump comes on the scene. And he overcomes the rig, right? People turned out in such numbers for him that he overcame that system that was rigged up in her favor. And people think that to acquire a presidential election, you'd have to do such a grand scheme that it'd be impossible to do. But the reality is, when you've got the media on your side, you've got the pollsters on your side, and all it takes is one swing state to make the difference, maybe 2 in some cases. all you have to do is affect one district in a swing state. Right? You don't have to do the whole state. You don't have to do the whole country. Just one district in one swing state. Swing that state in your direction. And it's that simple. You can keep the number of conspirators down to a minimum. It doesn't take, a mass effort to make it happen. However, you have pollsters who fluff the numbers and make it look like the race is close, even though from your own perspective, you go out in the world and you look around and you go, there's no way in the world that this race is anywhere close to what these people are telling me. But they tell you on the news, they tell you through polls, and yes, it's a close race, it's neck and neck. There's no way to call it, because that makes it look more feasible, right? For their results to be possible, their desired results to be possible. But then you get somebody like Trump who shows up on the scene and he completely just obliterates that margin, that little fluff factor that they put in there, indicating to me that the possibility of a legitimate election is still there, right? So what do you got to do in order to overcome that? Well, when President Trump runs for re-election, you have to turn it up a notch, right? In the middle of the night, you have to stop counting. You have to have sudden ballot drops, that show up in these particular swing states that will affect the election one way or the other, So anyway, that's neither here nor there. We know what happened in 2020. But more significantly, if 2020 had been legitimate, Donald Trump would have faded away into obscurity, just like all the other one-term presidents, the ones who've lost their re-election bid, aside from Grover Cleveland back in the 1890s. Now, what does that mean? It proves, without a doubt, in my mind anyway, that 2020 was acquired by the left, okay? Because if Trump had been as popular as he was in 2016, and then lost by such a huge margin in 2020, that means that the people, a legitimate voting, electorate, made a mandate, right? They mandated that he will not be president again. But the exact opposite of that happened, right? In fact, in this year, the mandate insists that what happened in 2020 was shenanigans and that there was no legitimacy to that election. If it were legitimate in 2020, Trump would have faded away into obscurity, would have gone back to his private life. They wouldn't have had to worry about him anymore. But instead, they ran this lawfare campaign against him, trying to get him put in prison, trying to get him, disqualified from being able to run for president again. It was all, we know, we don't have to state it, but the point being is that what happened last Tuesday proves beyond a shadow of a doubt that 2020 was not a legitimate election. And I just wonder what's going to be done about it. Again, what happened in last Tuesday is it proves that the mechanism for legitimate elections still exists. Okay. When a candidate like Trump shows up on the scene and he completely obliterates the ability to rig the system, then you know that the mechanisms is still in place for a legitimate election. And they couldn't question it this time. They couldn't go, they without showing their hand, they couldn't have objected. And why do you think it's been so quiet, right? Why do you think it's been so quiet? What else this proves is that the BLM riots, the Antifa riots, and all these things that were in opposition to Trump back in 2016 are orchestrated by the left. They're funded by the left. It proves it beyond a shadow of doubt, because if those things were legitimate protests, legitimate uprisings, or whatever you want to call it, it also proves that January 6th was an inside job too. But because if any of that stuff was legitimate, why isn't it happening now, right? Why isn't it going on right now? Because the left isn't funding it this time. They can't show their hand in the manner that it would expose them, right? If they funded those things now. What happened on Tuesday is so profound that it blows away the entire lie that has been fed to us since at least 2008, when the most racist country in the world elected a black man into office. Now, that's not to say that a black man can't be president. There's several that I would think could fill the bill. However, in 2008, Barack Obama was a nobody. Never was. He wasn't a has-been because he never was. He was what was he? A sophomore state senator who had done nothing, right? A community organizer. But yet he was the man that they chose to be their candidate over so many other known names, people who had accomplished things, people who had been in office for a while. That to me indicates shenanigans right off the bat. Trump, 8 years later, Biden should have stepped into the role of presidential candidate, considering that he had been running, 4 times since the 1980s. Anyway, all of that to say, I do believe that in many cases presidents are selected versus elected. However, I do believe that in 2016 and in 2024, the people were able to overcome the rigging, the acquisition of the office of president. And I'd like to know what you guys think. Please share this video, like this video. I want you all to know that I am not doing these videos for myself. I'm trying to build something that is going to be helpful for other people. Any income, any ad revenue, any whatever sort of, monetary gain that this channel is able to, produce from the day that it starts producing it for 1 year afterwards, 100% of the money will be put into a fund, or I haven't decided exactly how I'm going to do it, but it'll either be put into a fund or it'll be directly donated to relief society, whatever you want to call it, organizations. That's the word I'm looking for. To help people who've been affected by natural disasters, be it hurricanes, tornadoes, wildfires, direct energy weapons, whatever you want to call it, you know. That money, 100% of the money for 1 year from the time that this channel ever starts to earn an income, 100% of that money will be donated to relief organizations. Ultimately, I'd like to create my own relief organization with volunteers and equipment and funding and this, that, and the other, you know, to go out and do things like that. But until then, you know, that's just the dream. But yeah, help us out if you can. Help us grow. Let us know what you want to hear. Let me know, because it's just me. There is no us. Let me know what you would like to see. You know, I want to talk about preparedness. I want to talk about, you know, faith and belief systems, homesteading, many things. You know, where we're going. What do you think the future looks like? Let's talk about it, and we can determine. No, that's the wrong word. Let's talk about it, and you know, I can just throw my 2 cents in there and see what you guys think. Anyway, this was supposed to be a short video. For some reason, I can't ever make a video that's only 10 minutes long. But thank you for watching, if you made it this far, and we shall see you next time.